Hello, welcome back to All for United WFC. Well. We started the window with 3 Norwegians. We're now down to 1. And we've not even seen this one play yet fully. We saw her for a little bit, obviously, when she wasn't injured. So I thought, obviously, best person to get on when it comes to all these things. And as I put on my tweet, obviously at the time of recording this earlier today, Vilde was obviously one of the players that brought you to All for United, obviously from the women's side anyway. That kind of connection there, obviously backstage, just a little chat about Vilde's game time, and here you are, All for United WFC regular from then on. So, yeah, a little bit of backstory as to how you got onto the channel from that point of view as well. I'm not going to waste it. I'll just dive straight into the first one. We'll talk about Vilde because obviously that's at the time of recording this. That came out obviously today. It's something obviously we've been speaking about for a while as well on this one, whether she stays or goes. Obviously, there was talk all summer and so on. But just your initial thoughts on her departure. Because obviously for us, it's quite late in the window, and there's only a couple of days left now. It looks like there's a potential swap on the cards for Atletico, but it still seems to me this is a really bizarre one.
Yeah, I think it's extremely disappointing, Connor, how the whole thing was handled by the club in terms of acquiring 2 players, right? Vilde is obviously the one that we're going to talk most about today, but you bring in Maria Thorisdóttir from Chelsea there, bouncing back off an injury, struggling to get her place in Chelsea. You bring her in, you bring in 2 really, really high quality players, and then you basically don't use them. You put them on the shelf. You can't work out how to get the most out of them. And then sort of, let them rot away a little bit. Let them sit there thinking, oh, maybe I might get a chance. Maybe I won't. Maria moves down to Brighton and Hove Albion, which I think is going to be a fantastic move for her. And then to let Vilde go this late in the transfer window. And what bothers me is the manner in which this has happened, right? I think, and these are fairly strong words now, but I got to stand by it. I think this has been handled disgracefully by Manchester United. I think if you go out and you get a player who sort of, engineered everything that she had to do to get to Manchester United because they wanted her, and then to treat her in this way, I think is absolutely disgraceful. The information I have is that the player did not want to leave Manchester United. I remember last summer, just before the Euros, I sat down with her for quite a long time in a hotel in Oslo when we were doing UEFA's Media Access Day, and we did an interview about herself and about her late father and about her game, her play, and her time at Manchester United. This is a woman who wants to play or wanted to play for Manchester United, and I believe that she still wanted to play for Manchester United coming in to this season. So if we dial it back a little bit to before the World Cup, it's always dodgy talking about things like this and saying how right we were, because then we have to own all the things that we were wrong about. And I don't think any of us wants to do that in some way. But we spoke about how there was an opportunity for Vilde to take a role in the Norwegian midfield, which she did, okay? The World Cup was pretty much a disappointment for Norway, but she came in there, she wrote her name on the team sheet, she steadied the ship, and she did absolutely everything to get that team to the last 16, which they did. They were beaten, they went home, but Vilde Bøe Risa's stock rose. Now, prior to that, United had picked up the option and extended her contract. All the noises being made where, yeah, we know we have a great player, but then, we came second in the league or whatever, we just have to work out how to use her and that kind of thing. And then to ship her off in this way, as a sort of a make weight, if you like, in a deal for another very good player coming in. Absolutely, it's a good piece of business for Manchester United. But I just don't think that you treat people in this way. And I think this is going to come back to bite Manchester United in the backside, right? Because players are looking at this today and they're going, here's a player who said all the right things, who did all the right things, who kept quiet when she's on the bench, despite the fact that she could have come out and said, yeah, I should be playing more. She could have caused hassle in the dressing room. She didn't. She was extremely professional. They extended her contract. If they wanted to let her go, just let her go and let her choose the next place that she goes to. It's my honest belief that she didn't want to go to Spanish football. I think that Vilde enjoyed being in English football. I think that she felt that she had an awful lot more to prove in English football, much as Maria Thorisdóttir does. So I think that this is a very bad day for Manchester United. I think it's a good day for Vilde Bøe Risa, because as she said in her interview, she came to Atletico Madrid, this is a club where I'm wanted. And it just seems that she wasn't wanted at Manchester United. And I think that in that case, as we've said on this podcast or on this YouTube channel before, that if that's the case, let people go. Okay, don't hold people against their will. Let them go and be the best players that they can be. And I think Manchester United have to have a serious look at themselves today, because a lot of players will be looking at Manchester United and going, that could be me.
I think that's what's irked me a little bit. Obviously, I know we've got to be a little bit careful what we say here, because obviously it's not, and there's other things obviously going on. But I feel like I would almost question if United would have done this, if Vilde would have been moved on, if we weren't getting this player in the other way. Obviously, at the time of recording, that's not been confirmed by United yet, that that the Spanish midfielder is coming the other way. That's the talk online at the moment. All we know is that Vilde is definitely going, or has gone to Atletico Madrid. What you said there, I think, is very telling. In her interview, she was talking about obviously, happy to be at Atletico, and the fact she used the word wanted, I think, tells you everything. She didn't say a lot on it. She just said those, and she didn't need to say those words. That's not the question she was asked. But obviously, she chose those words. And I think that to me says a lot. And I'm just disappointed. I'm disappointed in United because I feel like I've got no issue if you wanted to sell Vilde. I think it's probably best for her. It's best for United because she wasn't getting in, playing at United. I've got no issue with that. But I feel like the way this has been done and the conversations had around her.
I think there's a deep cynicism to this, Connor, because again, if we go back to how Vilde arrived at Manchester United at all, right? She was at a club in Gothenburg, Kopparbergs Göteborg, as they were called then, who subsequently were being told, they won the league in Sweden, and they were told, okay, we're folding this club, and they went on to become BK Häcken, okay, who are one of the top teams in Sweden at the moment. They just took over that because the investors in the previous club just didn't want to be there anymore. And then she wanted to go to Manchester United, so she moved briefly back to Sandviken in her own country, which is a team that was starting up there. She played, she kept going for them. I think she played 3 full games for them. And then when the opportunity came to Manchester United, that was where she wanted to go to. So she did everything by the book, right? In terms of keeping herself fresh and fit and sharp to get ready to go to Manchester United. And she came there, and we have to say the first season was a success, right? But last season wasn't. She played 12 games in total, came off the bench 9 times, 3 starts, very limited. She played about half the amount of minutes last year than she did in the previous season, right? And I don't think that she as a player was ever given an explanation or a good enough explanation for that by Mark Skinner and by the coaching staff at Manchester United. She was never told what else she had to do in order to get more minutes and be to contribute more to that Manchester United side that she so desperately wanted to be a part of. That statement or that interview that she gave today, every word is weighed on a weighing scales now, and to come to a club and to use a word like wanted in the way that she does says 1,000 times more than what it would do in any other context, right? I know that there's a bigger story behind this, and I know that story will eventually come out, but again, the cynicism of saying to a player who has played half the amount of minutes that she played the previous season, and to say that we're going to pick up the option on your contract, we're going to extend your contract by a year, and you'd have to assume that Mark Skinner, Manchester United, knew full well that they weren't going to, she wasn't in their plans, right? But they did that because they saw her as an asset, right? They saw her as a piece in a financial puzzle to be moved on, either as like a small transfer fee to another club or as a make weight in a deal for another player that they wanted, right? And that's okay. That happens. It's, it's the nature of the beast. This is now a professional game, right? But we're not talking about a player similar to in the men's game, where a player who could be worth millions, and could be making millions. I don't feel as sorry for a man who's told that you've been sold to Bayern Munich and you're going to go there and you're going to earn 20, 30, 50 grand a week. I do object to a player like Vilde having her career or her future career path influenced and indeed decided for her, right? If they had let her go, if her contract had run out on the 30th of June, contracts tend to run out on the 30th of June, the 31st of December, right? If that had happened, she would have been free to choose her next club. United extended that. They picked up that option and they didn't allow her that. And that, to me, is not okay, right? We're talking about people who are often on short-term contracts. We're not talking about people who earn hundreds of thousands of euros or pounds or Swedish crowns a week. We're talking about people who earn, in some cases, less than you and I do, Connor. And that's pretty embarrassing when you think of the kind of jobs that we have, right? I think that we owe people respect and not to treat them as assets, as names or numbers on a balance sheet. I think we owe it to Vilde Bøe Risa as a player and a person, as somebody who never put a foot wrong in terms of her statements about United or her performances on the field. Like everybody else, she made mistakes in life, but she never gave less than 100% for that club. And to go there and then just 2 or 3 months after extending that contract and just include her as a make weight maybe in a deal for another player, or just to throw her off for a few £1,000s here or there, I don't think that's okay. It's something that's obviously coming into the women's game. We saw the transfer fee that was paid for Pernilla Harder. We've seen the money that's been rumoured to be on offer for the likes of Mary Earps, who is staying at the club maybe despite the fact that she might want to go somewhere else. And I think that we need to have a discussion around the moral aspect of what we're doing here, right? Was Vilde Bøe Risa consulted about this step in her career? Did she want to take this step in her career? I am not convinced that she did. And I think that then we have to ask questions of ourselves as fans and as club administrators as to how we treat the women that play for our clubs, especially given the discussions that we've had post-World Cup about how women in the game are treated in general, right? Because again, it's like comparing apples and pears to compare the women's to the men's game now. The women's game is changing. There is a lot more money around it, but it's not life-changing money just yet. And I don't think that we can just treat her as some sort of a slave or some sort of a person that we can just sell on as an asset and not worry about her future well-being or the future of her career.
I think that's it, isn't it? You know, obviously, some people would see it as ruthless, I guess. Some people call it old school. For me, I've got an issue with it purely just because of, like I said, I've got no issue. I don't think, you know, moving Vilde on, I think is probably the right thing, as I said earlier, for both her and for United. I just find it bizarre, you know, and you know, the club and Mark of Skinner has got to say the right things in press conferences. He's never going to come out and say, "Oh yeah, by the way, she's on the market," because, you know, players and managers are just not going to do that. But the way that they were talking about Vilde at the back end of the season, everything led to she's going to have a big season with United next year. It was extended pretty early. It was still is one of the only contract extensions that was publicly announced by Mark. You know, we've got other players that are still at the club that we're now assuming have signed extensions or that have been extended because they're still with the club, even though their contracts ran out. So Vilde was the one that was announced. And now we're seeing this off the back of a really good World Cup. And I think that's what bothers me a little bit with this one. But
do you know what's interesting about that, Connor? And again, I'm just making the assumption now. I have absolutely nothing to base this on, right? But I'm making the assumption that the club extended their contract knowing that she wasn't part of their plans, right? Just everything they have done in this situation is indicative that that's what the plan was from the very beginning, right? And they must have sat there during the World Cup and seen her coming off the bench and then starting a couple of games of the World Cup and just seeing the value of this player rise and rise and rise, right? Because sometimes in football, it's not about what you do, it's about when you do it, right? So the point where they extended Vilde's contract, her value was X, right? But that value rose during the Women's World Cup. And I'm sure in negotiations in terms of either transfer fee or the kind of player that they could swap her for, that her value increased exponentially at that time because she performed so well during the World Cup and displayed that kind of leadership and the passing range and all those other things that we've spoken so highly of in the past, right? But again, it comes back to that thing. It's well within the remit of Manchester United and of Mark Skinner and of everybody at the club to do exactly what they want with players, right? This is how it works. You sign a contract, you know that this can happen, right? But and again, what's said in public, I don't give fivepence for what's said in public around players and contracts and that kind of thing, because they say the things that they have to say, right? They have to say she's going to have a big season next year. Otherwise, yeah, we're extending our contract, but she should probably be on the bench. Nobody's ever going to say that kind of thing. But I do think that there's a level of honesty behind the scenes. You're dealing with somebody whose career is limited, right? Most footballers, and especially if you think the way, you know, ACL injuries and various different injuries happen in the women's game now, their window for making money and for making a career is very, very small, right? And it's also extremely limited in terms of, you know, there's only a sort of a top, you know, a fraction of 1%, you know, who will be anywhere close to economically sort of rich or wealthy or whatever at the end of this. Vilde Bøe Risa is going to have another job for the rest of her life after she's finished playing football, right? And this is why I don't think that it's morally or ethically fair to do this kind of thing to her, to sort of, you know, to turn her into a contract that can be sold or exchanged or that kind of thing, you know. And this is a discussion that we have to have, because this may be the first time. I spoke to another agent today just over WhatsApp, and I was asking this person if this was something that happens a lot in the game, and they were saying, well, yeah, okay, a club can accept a bid or they can accept a deal of a swap for a player, but the player doesn't have to go. And obviously that's the case. Nobody has to go anywhere they don't want to. But what would have then happened? Say if Vilde Bøe Risa comes back to Manchester United and says to Mark Skinner and the club, I actually want to stay and fight for my place, right? What do they say to her then, right? Do they say to her, I'm sorry, you're not part of our plans. Under me, you're not going to play at all. Or you're going to train with the reserves, as we've seen happen in the men's game when you're trying to freeze a player out. Because for me, this now becomes an issue of the workplace, right? I've made the comparison before that it doesn't matter. Professional footballers are workers like everybody else. They sign a contract to deliver a service. Now, some of them, like Erling Haaland across the city from many Manchester United fans there, make an absolute fortune. And it's very hard to feel sorry for them. But there are players who are influenced by the rules that we have in the men's game that have been handed down from the Bosman judgment on, right, who are limited in their ability to make a living, right? And I remember a young player called Joe Yoffe, who once played for FC United of Manchester. Joe was considering taking a case to the European Court of Human Rights at one point because he's limited to the number of professional clubs that he can play for in a year. I think it's actually 2 that he's limited to play for in a year. It could be 2 or 3. I can't remember the exact legislation. In what other field of work are you limited in terms of the amount of times that you can change your employer in a year? I really can't think of any. If I resign my freelance contracts in the morning, nobody's stopping me from working for anybody else. There's no European legislation out there that stops me, right? But that will stop Vilde Bøe Risa. So she's played for Manchester United this calendar year, and she'll play for Atletico Madrid in this calendar year. And that means possibly that she won't be able to play for another club in this calendar year. So her career is effectively sort of shoehorned into a corner that she may not want to be in. And we've seen players. I know of another player who went to Spain there, took the opportunity to go to Spain, didn't work out for her. And she could have told me after maybe 4 weeks, hey, this is shit, mate. I've got to get out of here. And yet she wasn't capable of doing so. The club wasn't in a position to be able to accept a bid for her. And even if she did, she wasn't able to play for another club. So these are things that are happening outside the player's control. And this is what makes me so wary of this situation. And the problem for Manchester United as a club, Manchester United had done so much right over the last number of years in terms of the players they brought in, how they treated them, how they moved them on. I know Manchester United fans are annoyed with Russo for going to Arsenal, these kinds of things. That's just the way the game is, right? But they've done so much right. And this really, to me, is stepping on a landmine. Because I think that every player of the caliber that Manchester United want will be looking at this case today and going, hang on a second. If I go there and if I believe all the things that we say when we're sitting across the table between agents and football clubs and sporting directors and players, if I believe all the things they say and they whip that rug out from under me tomorrow, where am I then? What club do I wind up in then? Do I wind up in an Italian club or a Spanish club or a Scottish club that I don't want to be at? Okay. Do I wind up in the reserves at Manchester United picking up a wage but not getting any more experience, not developing as a player, not offered or given the opportunities that I was semi-promised when I signed here? And this is a serious, serious issue because Manchester United are no longer one of the only big clubs in the game now. There's Barcelona, there's Real Madrid, and there's all sorts of German and Italian and other English clubs, London City Lionesses. You have Bristol who've come up and have been very ambitious. So if the choice comes down to going between a Bristol City that are not going to get you maybe into the Champions League, but will treat you with respect and will ask you what you want to do when your time at the club is up there, and a Manchester United are going to shoehorn you into a move that you do not want, these are the questions that players are going to ask themselves and agents are going to ask themselves before they put their players in that position. And that's very, very serious because that window is closing very, very shortly. And the targets that they are looking for are going to be looking at this going, hang on a second, mate, I'm not too sure I want to go there.
I think that's it. Just to kind of, I guess, summarize what we've said in the last kind of 18 minutes. Obviously, there's a lot of strong words used from yourself. I really want to say a lot of what I want to as well, but I feel like if the background of this gets out, they'll realize why we're being so or speaking so passionately, I guess, about the way this was handled. But I think you're right, and word gets around. Women's football is still a very small community. The word does get around between agents and players and family members and all these kinds of things, and it does worry me a little bit. I know. Obviously, Vilde was very well liked among the squad, obviously with Millie Turner and Lisa, obviously, that's still there as well. She had a lot of good friends at United as well. And it's also strange as well, the day that this had to have been agreed, obviously last Wednesday, United were putting out images of Vilde and Millie Turner doing stuff for, I can't remember what it was, the foundation, Adidas, yeah. So, yeah, really bizarre to me. And like I said, maybe the story will come out at some point, but I think everyone can get from what we've just said there that this has not been handled.
I'll tell you what, mate.
Handled particularly well.
The story has already come out to people in the women's game, right? Because the person who told me that Vilde Bøe Risa was being sold against her will, it wasn't an agent, it wasn't Vilde herself, it was a player. Okay. And these things, they're not rumors. This is a fact that, this player came to me and said, this is what I've heard. Vilda's being sold to another club and she doesn't want to go. Right. And if that's coming from players, then that the WhatsApp groups and the FIFPro WhatsApp groups and everything, the players union, they're all alive with that. Right. And the collateral damage in this is Lisa Naalsund, who you just mentioned. Right. She's gone from having 2 of our country women there and they can talk about, eating ribbe for Christmas dinner and they can talk about bringing back Freya chocolate from the next time they drive home and that kind of thing. That's all gone now. now. So there's a social support network there. Millie Turner's friend has left the club, right? And we talk about football being, Roy Keane, a very famous Manchester United player, often talked about how he has no friends in the game. He basically only puts up with Gary Neville because he works with him. But there's very few players that he has any contact with. It's a very, very cynical, very, very sort of, solo run game. People are in this for their career, for themselves, and for the millions that they can make. The women's game is not like that, right? And people have long, long memories in this game. They have very strong relationships. If you look at Erin Cuthbert and Guro Reiten at Chelsea, like those two are like peas in a pod. They couldn't wait to get back from the World Cup, Guro, so she could hang around with her and be on Instagram again and that kind of thing, right? These things are important because what they don't get, they're not enriched with money, but they're enriched with experiences and with friendships, right? And that's why we need to press the pause button now in the women's game and say, are we treating them the way they deserve to be treated, the way they want to be treated? Are we sending them into safe situations? Are we looking after them mentally and physically the way we should be? Because essentially, the summer of 2023 and the World Cup of 2023 has been about putting women and players and their safety and their security and their dignity in focus, right? And we can't stand here and say, "Se acabo." And we can't stand here and say, "Contigo, Jenny, contigo, Amos." We can't say any of these things if we're going to stand idly by and let players just be shuffled in and out without commenting on them.
You certainly make some fair points there, and as you just said, that it's clearly been passed around, and I think I know for a fact that it has from other points of view as well. So, what a situation this has become, and like I said, she's going to be missed. Even take all this aside, I think if she'd have left on good terms, I think she would have been missed. She's clearly a fan favourite. United obviously well liked on and off the pitch, and I said this at the back end of the season. For the less minutes she had, obviously compared to other players, from an All for United point of view, she was actually second most voted on our player of the match polls. So we did player of match polls after every single game last season. She was second behind Honor in terms of how many she got. I think that tells you everything you need to know in terms of when she played. And people can say about the opposition and all that kind of stuff, but when she played, she was the best player. So I feel like, I don't know. We'll see what happens
I think it's important to say as well, Conor, that I don't think that through the whole time that this was happening, because obviously it's been a difficult situation over the last two seasons or so for Vilde Bøe Risa, but she never lost the love of the United fans. She knew how much United fans loved her and appreciated, because she got that on social media all the time, every time. Like you say, she got the votes when she played in games because that's how good she was. And I know how much she appreciated that. And I know that no matter what the feelings might be towards, the people in the club who made these decisions, I'm sure she's not happy with that. But there was never any problem with the fans. She felt that love and she felt that appreciation from, as well she should. And I don't think that will ever change. I think, the club has said that she'll always be welcome back there. But I do think that, Vilde Bøe Risa will never have a bad word to say about United's fans, because they've been absolutely brilliant towards her. And she deserved that. And she still deserves that.
No, for sure. Maybe we'll see about one day as a fan. She can come and cheer us on. Maybe she'll always be welcome in the stands with us. That's for sure. Just to kind of summarise, then, what would this is going to be tough, obviously, because it's pretty raw from our point of view in terms of how would you, out of 10, sum up her time at United? Do you think it's on the upper end, or would you put it on the lower end? How would you kind of assess that one?
I would give her 8 out of 10. I will give the way the club handled her 3 out of 10. Because we've discussed the various different ways that she could have been used and the ways that she could have been developed and that kind of thing, and virtually none of that happened at the club, and that's fine. It's up to the coaching staff there to try to get the best out of the player, and they obviously had different options that they want to try and that kind of thing. But I do think that there's an awful lot of players in the professional game who come in, and this is in the women's game as well as the men's game. They come in, they make their money, they go home. They don't care. They don't, some of them don't care. They don't try. They don't. There's certain players who, once they sign a professional contract, they think that they've made it. That's actually the starting point. It's not the end point for anything in the game of football. That's when you really start. It's like getting a black belt in jiu-jitsu. That's when you really start to learn, And I felt that Vilde always was the player who turned up, and anytime I ever spoke to her about United or about the Norwegian national team, she always wanted to learn. She always wanted to be better. She was always interested in feedback about how she'd played and what she'd done and what she could do better. And she took that from people around her, from fellow players, from coaches, from fans, from absolutely everybody. She watched her own performances and tried to be better. She's still hugely well appreciated down in Gothenburg. Like, they would have taken her back. I think I said to you during the summer there, the Häcken would have taken her back in a heartbeat, not just because the player she is, but because the person she is. And I think if you look back over the whatever, was it 44 or something international games. I can't remember exactly how many games she played for Manchester United, right? When you look back over that time, I think what you got was a model professional who lived for the club and who really did try to do her best every time she put her boots on, whether it be on the training pitch or in a match situation. And she really appreciated that. She really understood what an honour it was to play for Manchester United, and she wanted to give her best to show that she was deserving of that honour. And if you ask me, she would have been the more deserving of that honour, or to have that honour an awful lot more than what she got. So I think that Vilde Bøe Risa can walk away from Manchester United with her head held high, and I think she deserves to be remembered by fans and by the club as somebody who showed that integrity and who showed that courage and who showed that desire to be the best version of herself every time she pulled on the shirt. So I think absolutely that she has to have, the highest grade possible for her time there.
Yeah, I think it's hard to disagree with that. I'd probably put it pretty similar, to be honest. Obviously, for me, the way United handled it, I wouldn't even give it a score. But I feel like for her, every time I've watched her, I thought she was good. She struggled a little bit, I think, to start with, but as everyone does when they come to a new league. So I'd say an 8 is probably about right for her. We're 25 minutes in. We've not even touched on the other two players. So I'm not going to spend too much longer on this because I wanted this to be a little bit short, but we had to get all the Vilde stuff out there. Obviously, you mentioned Maria. Just a quick word on her and what your thoughts are on her departure. I don't think it's a massive surprise to United fans. Again, another player that wasn't really getting game time. So what's your kind of thoughts on her? It's staying in the WSL, though, so that's going to be quite interesting.
Yeah, I have to say, I found that interesting, and I sent her a message over the summer saying I thought that she was going to go home to Norway. She's going to take Theo the dog and head home to Norway, and the Sandviken or Brann or somebody would offer a huge amount of money to play there. But this is the thing about Maria. The thing we tend to forget about her is she's a warrior queen, right? She believes, and rightly so, that she can still perform at the WSL level. She has unfinished business there. That concussion that she had at Chelsea that caused her to miss a lot of time, the knee injury that she suffered at Manchester United that also caused her to miss a lot of time, that doesn't sit well with her. She's not done. She has unfinished business in the WSL, and she'll go up there now against Chelsea and against Manchester United next year and want to show them and want to show the best side of herself. She has a couple of other Norwegian players there. I think Elizabeth Carland is still there at Brighton, so she has a few friends down there. I think she's going to do very, very well down there. The difference really between Brighton and Manchester United and Chelsea is that now the pressure is really off her, right? She was very much in a sort of a hothouse atmosphere, competing against really, really good players, and there's very good players at Brighton and Hove Albion as well, right? But she's not expected to take this team into the top 2 or 3. She's not expected to take them into the Champions League. She's just expected to go out there and perform. And I think one of the things that's underestimated about Maria is that the time that she would have spent in Chelsea and Old Trafford, it's not so much and it is a lot to do with what she did on the pitch, but it's also what she did off the pitch, right? This is somebody who really looks after her body. She's a real sort of positive person to have around the place. She's very approachable. She's very experienced. She shares that experience. She's not selfish with that. She doesn't keep it to herself. She helps other people around her. I've seen her do that in the national team settings with younger players. She helps them to learn how to be a professional footballer, and that's something of huge value. Now, obviously, Manchester United have other players that they can turn to for that, but Maria is just one of those people that I've always had an awful lot of time for her, and I always sing her praises when I'm given the opportunity, and I think that Brighton will benefit greatly from that. I don't think, to be honest, that United would have had the season that they had last season if you don't have people like Maria in the dressing room. Doesn't matter that she didn't play that many games. It doesn't matter that she wasn't there, for the big games of the season, or maybe, she was coming off the bench a lot of the time. People like that set the tone. People look up to people like Maria, and she sets the bar. And your job then as a younger professional player making their way in the game is to clear that bar that she sets for you every day. So if we didn't see the best of her work on the pitch, I certainly think that she was a hugely influential figure off it, and I think that she'll be well remembered for that.
No, for sure. Again, Maria, another fan favourite, as you said there, off the pitch, she was always around the fans, always gave time after the games. And, I know that all of the players do, but she was the one that was always hyping the crowd up, especially on the smaller grounds where you're close to the pitch. She was always on the sidelines trying to really do the crowd. So she's, again, maybe when you look at it on the pitch, didn't contribute, a great deal to what we see with the on match days, but certainly in and around the squad, from what I've heard, and off the pitch as well, she contributed a lot more than what I think people think on that one. Just to kind of incorporate Lisa into this, then obviously there's been some talk now. Obviously, Lisa is now the only remaining Norwegian, as I said at the start. We started the window with 3, we've now got 1. The reason why, I don't know how to phrase this question, but obviously Lisa was a little bit skeptical, it seemed, at the time to join United. There was talk that, it's happening. Then the deal was off, it seemed, for about a week, and there was a big delay. There was rumoured that it was over potential game time. Obviously, Hager Risa at the time was very outspoken about United as well. Where do you think she stands with all this? Because she's, as you said earlier, looking at this going, she's got two of her pals, her international pals there, and it's all great. She's lost both of them. I know she gets on well with other players in the squad as well, so I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue. But do you think there's going to be a little bit of doubt in her mind now going, have I made the right decision here?
I think that's the biggest worry from a Manchester United point of view. And if they weren't on the phone to her the moment they hung up after telling Vilde Bøe Risa that she was going to Atletico de Madrid, if they went on the phone to Lisa straight after that, then somebody is not doing their job, right? Because obviously the girls are going to tell, or Vilde's going to be telling Lisa exactly what happened. She will be spared none of the details whatsoever, right? And again, when a player signs for your club, right, they do that trusting that they're going to leave your club a better player than when they came, right? They do that trusting that they're going to have the opportunity to, if they play well enough and if they do their work and if they develop, that they will get the opportunities that you have promised them, right? And now we're in a situation in the women's game. If you look at Chelsea, for instance, you can pretty much buy any player that they want. I was at a game the other day. I was watching Kira Crooney-Cross playing for Hammarby against Djurgården, and she's obviously a target. She's been linked to Manchester United. She's been talked about going to Chelsea, right? This is a young Australian player, a tremendous player, exactly, fingers crossed there, right? But, if she's looking at that now and the choice comes down to those two clubs, who do you think she's going to pick? Right? This is the real difficulty that I have in this situation. The Manchester United brand, and I don't think it can be overstated, it's really damaged by this, right? And Lisa could be sitting there going, okay, the first chance I get, because if they don't call her straight away and explain to her what the thinking was behind letting Vilde and Maria go, right? If they don't do that and somehow reassure her, then if her phone isn't ringing, she's going to call her agent and she's going to say, what do we have to be doing here? What do we have to be aware of here? Because as I say, the window for these players is very, very small. There's a lot of good players in Norway. And if you find yourself sitting on the bench, or if you find yourself in a club where you're not getting game time or the requisite amount of game time for the new manager coming in, whoever that's going to be over the long term, right? I'm sorry, that's like these things, you have to take control of the things that you can control. And Lisa's not going to sit there after seeing what has happened to Maria and what's going to after happening to Vilde and said, oh, sorry, tactically we couldn't find a place for you. Well, why didn't you say that when you were signing me? This is the kind of thing that you can't get away with in women's football anymore. And if she's sitting on a short-term contract, it may very well be that she's sitting there looking at her watch going, yeah, sorry, lads, I'm out of here after this. There'll be no contract extensions. There'll be no discussions, right? You've let me down here and I want to get out of here. Now, obviously, I haven't spoken to Lisa. I don't know Lisa in that way. But if I was Lisa's representative, if I was her family, if I was her former coach, I'd be telling her to watch out now, because what we have, what we have in hand is what just happened to Vilde Bøe Risa. And that's the most recent thing the players are going to remember when they look at Manchester United as a football club and say, do I want to put my future in their hands? And right now, there's not a whole lot of players that are going to be answering yes to that unless they're paying out big, big money.
Certainly it's going to be a bit of a concern, because Lisa is a player that I've had tipped to be starting next season, purely because we paid a big fee for her, or bigger than we usually would in that kind of position. As you mentioned, Crooney-Cross, if we get her in, I always said at the time, where does that leave Vilde? Obviously now, where does it leave Lisa if we get another midfielder in? Obviously, Miyazawa has come in, can play there. Already got Zalem Tooney as well. Watson's obviously coming through. So it's going to be tough for her. I really don't know how this is going to play out. And it will be a shame. And I think the key whole takeaway for this for me is, as you said, that how this looks to agents, to other players, because the word gets around, and I feel like that potentially is going to harm us down the line. Some players will probably just won't care and will join regardless and have those kind of things, but for others, I feel like, and it's this close to the start of the season.
Yeah, the risk, Connor, is that you end up having to overpay for players that you shouldn't be overpaying for, right? Because you can't get the players that you really want, right? You can't get the top level players, because they're going to look at that and go, no, I'm better off going to Atletico Madrid straight away, or whatever other option they have. And then you say to a sort of a younger player from a Scandinavian club, well, we'll bring you over. And they're going to go, hang on a second, the last couple of Scandinavians that were with you, they didn't exactly do so well. And then you end up tacking $1,000 or a $2,000 or $3,000 onto their monthly wage. And all of a sudden you're paying a huge amount of money for a player who may not be worth it, right? And that's just a hypothetical situation. But when your brand is damaged in that way, there is a cost. Okay, you have to pay over the odds to get people to trust you. That's the only way to get them back. The only other way to do it is time, and show that you can keep the promises that you make to players, because agents are extremely sensitive. Their job is to get the best deal in the best circumstances for their player, right? Can we say the Vilde's representatives have done that? In hindsight, we can't, because they told her and they advised her, and she went and she took something and it didn't work out, you know. So these are the things that Manchester United, you know, when you're building a squad, you have to think of these things. There's a reputational damage involved there, right? A younger player, you know, who might be 19 or 20 might be prepared to take that risk, but a player like Vilde in the prime of her life at the age of 28 doesn't have that time to take that risk, especially when you think of how many seasons she was at Arne Bjørnar in Norway and probably working part-time as well, you know. So these are all things that Manchester United have to consider, and it's no longer good enough to go pulling in players like Kira Cooney-Cross just because of the name of Manchester United and thinking, oh, we'll get her and we'll pay her and that'll be fine, right? Because now you're after weakening your competitive hand here. You don't have the cards that you once had to play because people just point at Vilde and they point at Maria and go, you know, look at this is what happened, you know. So I do think that they're after making it a little bit more difficult for themselves, and again, that window's closing very, very shortly.
No, for sure, it's going to be an interesting couple of days, that's for sure, on that one. But yes, we'll wrap it up there because we've gone on a little bit longer than I thought we would. But I felt it was important just to get all of that out in terms of, you know, for people who may not have be aware, or obviously talking about the Vilde thing. I've seen a lot of blame laid where blame shouldn't be laid, and I felt that this was an important show to do. And obviously we had to talk about Maria and what that means for Lisa as well, because I feel like there's, well, it obviously impacts United.
Well, now, in fairness, Connor, on a very similar theme, I need a guarantee from you that if Lisa does leave Manchester United, I'll still be allowed to come on this show, despite the fact that there are no Norwegians or Swedes left. So I need a commitment from you, man, because otherwise I'm just going to have to look to other United fan channels too.
Oh, no, for sure. You're one of those that are tied down to like a 10-year contract. Oh, for United, you are.
one club man at this stage on the fan channels. You know?
So we'll definitely be getting you back on throughout, obviously, the WSL. Maybe we'll get a WSL preview show or something like that in there before the start of the season. We'll see how that one develops. But obviously, if people want to follow you, are you doing any more Twitter Spaces coming up?
So I'm not going to say too much about it, but there was obviously Twitter Spaces in Swedish during the World Cup with former Sweden goalkeeper Hedvig Lindahl and Mia Eriksson, who's been on this channel many times. And we're talking at the moment about doing them again, or doing podcasts in Swedish or in English. But if you just follow me at Philip O'Connor on Twitter, or if you follow the legend that is at Connor Roberts _, you'll find out what I'm doing, because he's forever retweeting me there. He's forever in me mentions, that lad. So we'll keep an eye out. And there will hopefully be stuff around international women's football and club football, and obviously the WSL then as well.
No, for sure. Make sure you're following Phil. As we said, obviously at the time of recording this, it's Tuesday afternoon. So we'll see what comes out in the coming days. If it doesn't, you're just going to have to take our word for it. But I will put on record and say we wouldn't be doing this show and putting it out there if we weren't pretty sure on what we're saying and what we've got to say. So make of that what you will. It's up to you guys. You are the viewers. Make sure you drop a like and subscribe. Obviously, if you listen to this on Spotify, I probably should have said that at the start, actually. If you listen to this on Spotify, obviously give us a rating, all that stuff. And if you want to come and tweet us your opinions, obviously at All for United WFC on Twitter, or just drop it in the YouTube comments. This will be on YouTube as well. Make sure you're doing all those things, and we shall see you guys in the next one.